bids. And by the time they got through beating on me, I was down between the two beds with the pillows piled up. And I had never seen him in all of the years we were together as quite that foolish and playful. And it was so good.
Yeah.
Because he'd tell jokes, but whenever he told jokes, he'd tell jokes rather restrained. But he had no inhibitions, and he was living with such an abandon that I was pleased to see him that way. And then there was a knock on the door. And Reverend Kyle said, "You all are supposed to be at dinner." And it was about 5:45. And he said, "My wife's been cooking all day. If you all don't hurry up and get ready." He said, "Well, let me go upstairs and put on a clean shirt and tie." And he left. And I sat there and said, "What was the matter with him? What have you all been doing?" You know, and there were no beer bottles or wine bottles or nothing around. And, you know, it was just catfish. I said, "You all got high on catfish." And somebody said it must have been Freedom High. And I felt really good. But then James Orange was a great big guy. We were all playing being foolish. So when James knocked on the door and we went out, I started boxing with James. And so we were sort of shadow boxing out there in the parking lot. And Martin came out and I said, "You know, it's kind of cool. You better go back and get a coat. You've had a cold." Because the night before, even before that brilliant speech, he'd had a fever. He'd been depressed. He didn't want to come to the meeting. We went to the meeting and saw the crowd there. It was pouring down rain, and we went back to get him. And so the contrast from the day before to that day was just, phenomenal. But when the shot rang out, we had been playing, so I thought it was a firecracker. Our car backfired. And I looked up and didn't see him. And I thought he was clowning again. And then I saw that his shoes had come off of his feet. And his shoes were laying under the rail. And his body was down. And it was clear from that moment, as soon as I ran up there, that the bullet had hit the tip of his chin and went straight to his spinal cord. And so the picture you see of us pointing was because all of the police started running over here. We said, "Don't come over here. The shot came from over there." Now, nobody went over there where the shot came from. They all were coming over here to see what happened. And I don't know what that means, but after that, we all ended up in the room that he had been in. The downstairs room was his brother's room, but we ended up in the room that he was living in. And we got together, and Jesse had gone on back to Chicago. But James Orange and Bevel and Jose Williams and Bernard Lee and all of us that were left got together and said, "Look, as Ralph said in his funeral service, they can kill the dreamer, but we need to make sure that the dream lives on." Now, I get a little frustrated at Morehouse because there seems to be a tendency to diminish the significance of nonviolent social change. And you all go through various kinds of stages of militancy or confusion, whatever it is. But I want you to look at Harlem. And Harlem was that same way in 1957 when I lived up there. It has not changed at all. Atlanta in 1957, the airport was a Quonset hut with one runway. Atlanta is a testament to the implementation of the gospel and the mission of Martin Luther King. Maynard Jackson decided to get in politics on the day that Martin was killed. And he ran first against Herman Talmadge, but he came right back in 1969 and ran for the city council presidency, or vice mayor as we called it then. And then I ran for the Congress in 1970, was elected in 1972. We elected Maynard mayor in 1973. And this city started to change. And we were less than 1 million people then. But now we're almost 5.9 million, pushing to 6 million. And it was because I think what Martin was trying to do in the Poor People's Campaign was to get us to focus on eliminating poverty. Well, you couldn't eliminate poverty without economic growth. And when Martin was killed and Nixon was elected, because people got confused about everything. They changed the rules of the game economically. And it's why I tell people, and to the last question, what would he want us to be doing? All of the things that Jim Lawson said about the world in which we live are symptoms of a dysfunctional global economy. That almost everywhere in the world, there's some people getting very, very rich, but the majority of people are getting poorer and poorer. And the gap between rich and poor is wider, which is the reason why I said somebody needs to be studying some economics. Because we've got to restructure a global economy. Finally, Martin said, I admire the Good Samaritan, but I don't want to be one. I don't want to spend my life picking up people by the side of the road after they've been beaten up and robbed. I want to change the Jericho Road. And I say the difference that he was meaning there was that individual charities, individual missions, individual service is wonderful. But we didn't do that in the civil rights movement. We systematically changed the world. We were in Birmingham, but the whole South changed. We were singing We Shall Overcome here, but it helped the Berlin Wall come down. And so, and then Morehouse gave Jimmy Carter an honorary degree in 1976. And I think that in the charter,